Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today we're joined by my partner in crime, Willemina, my wife. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So this is kind of exciting. This is somewhat of a test episode, and what I've been thinking is that just hearing the sound of me constantly may get a little bit boring. So for that reason, we want to try and integrate potentially some co-hosts that come on from time to time. And so for our first kickoff here, we have the one and only co-host, Willemina, to actually join us on this call. And we will be going through this episode by way of a discussion. We're going to bring up a topic and we're just going to go through some points and discuss it together. And that way, hopefully you're not just going to be stuck listening to my voice over and over again. How does that sound for you, Willemina?
That sounds great.
So what are we discussing today?
Well, there's a topic that's close to us because we talk about this often, just having our own brokerage. But the topic is around real estate agents and why do agents fail? Why do agents get in an industry and leave? And and I think we both have some interesting thoughts on the topic.
Totally. And it's an important topic. It's a really important topic because of the failure rate. But even before we get into some of these points, I think it's worth talking about the failure rate, generally speaking. And then also I just want to highlight one little personal story around this too. So first off, the failure rate, a lot of us that will see it is 87%. Now, we think of that as a really high failure rate. But on the same side of the coin, as a real estate agent, we're starting a new business. And the failure rate for a general startup is like 95% plus. So in fact, the success rate as a real estate agent, because you're starting a new business, is actually higher than that of anybody else just starting a business from scratch. So I think sometimes we think of this failure rate as really high, and it is high when we're thinking of it in terms of an employee relationship versus starting a business. But I think if we think of it as starting a business, it's high, but it's not so high that it's insurmountable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's one of the big things is that I think people don't generally treat it as they're getting into a business. They look at it, okay, this is a career choice. And if for most people, if they're starting a new career and you told somebody that their chance of failure at this career, however you want to interpret the word failure, is 87%. I think it does seem high, and it seems like the odds are stacked against you.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. And I think going in with that mindset is actually helpful because then it helps us understand that this isn't going to be a walk in the park. And the first couple of years aren't going to be a walk in the park. And on that note, actually, just before we jump into the points that we've made, my story is one of failure as well, because I kind of got in with the same impression that I was getting a real estate license and I was getting a job. And from then on out, now that I have my license and now that I have my office set up, the phone's just going to ring. And probably the majority of people listening to this know that that's not the case. But when we're brand new and we're getting into the industry, they can feel like that's just what's going to happen. And so I have definitely been one of those 87%, and I kind of clawed my way back in. But that being said, I've been on the side of hanging up the license after 1 year as well. So let's jump into these points. And then something kind of interesting is we have not seen each other's notes. So we're going to bring up points here, but we have not seen each other's notes. So we'll see where this goes and we'll see if we have any similarities. We probably do. But why don't you kick us off, Willemina? What do you have on your list?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I have on my list is I think that when it comes to the outside looking in as a non-agent before somebody gets their license, there's a big difference between perception and reality. Of what the job of a real estate agent is like. So I'd argue that I think a lot of people truly don't know what they're getting into. In the way that I look at this, I think, a lot of times it's even just comments that clients, friends, people make, and they think, they think that big part of our job, and it is a significant portion of our job, but they think that our job is to be out all day showing homes and writing offers. That's I think a lot of the public perception around the realtor's job is that's what we do all day. But I think there's a bit of a lack of understanding of where do those leads come from, like those clients, what does it take to get those clients, and just not a full understanding of what the career entails. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And I think a lot of this is it's even pushed further by people watching HGTV and seeing, the commission at the bottom of the screen, and they see a quick negotiation over the phone or over text. Sadly, the reason why a lot of people do get into real estate, and I wouldn't even say maybe this is a negative, is because they want to run their own schedule and they want to make a lot of money. And the challenging thing is when you get started, you're not going to have either of those. And if you come into the industry with the expectation that you're going to make a ton of money and you're going to build your own schedule and not have your clients at least somewhat dictate that, you're setting yourself up for failure. You really are. So I think that that's a really insightful way of looking at it is when we're getting into this industry, we're getting in with the wrong lens of how we think it's going to be. So how would we go about, in your opinion, I guess, moving more in the right direction? If we see ourselves, let's say we're in the industry 1-2 years right now, and we're like, yeah, I totally understand this. This is exactly what I'm feeling. What would you say to that agent?
Absolutely. So I think there's two parts. I'd say before even getting your license, I think there's a lot that could be learned by, talking to an agent who's been in the industry for a long time, who has who produces at a relatively high level, and just truly have a conversation with them. See if you know somebody who's in the industry. Ask them what it's like. Ask them about their struggles, and ask them about what do they love about their job? What are the harder parts? To really get a feel for it, because I think firsthand experience like that is very invaluable to seeing, okay, can I picture myself doing this? Is this appealing? So I think before you get in, that's important. But then let's say somebody who's already licensed, I think the most valuable insights and experience and knowing what should we be doing. I think it's truly to either have a mentor, shadowing under somebody, getting those real insights from agents who have done this before. I think that's invaluable. Yeah,
I agree. There's this concept of like learning by osmosis, right? And I remember when we were with one of the bigger franchises, and we had an office at this bigger franchise. And I remember going there and going to the office and loving going to the office, not because I would get more work done, but because I sat right across the way. Remember, it was Mike who was right across the way, really high producer. And I just loved listening to his phone calls. I would listen to him on the phone negotiating deals, and I would listen to him talking to clients. And just purely through osmosis, from just listening to him, I improved my skill set. So I think just like being around more agents is really, really key for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's so many ways to do that. I know since the pandemic, I would say a lot of that whole office scenario that's becoming a little bit old school. There's not as much of that these days. I'd say there's still some, but there's less of that. So you have to really find ways to put yourself into that mindset and surround yourself with more experienced agents. So it's about surrounding yourself with agents in whatever capacity you can. So, a lot of local real estate boards will have classes that are being taught by more experienced agents. So that's a great way to get that knowledge. And it's even just that the language, right? I find a lot of times new agents, they don't know what they don't know. And it becomes a matter of, you need to really truly like absorb yourself in real estate. So there's lots of ways to do that. I mean, there's so many options now. There's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's blog posts, there's things you can do, but it's just constantly being around real estate and truly like living and breathing real estate, because it's a really high, like there's a lot to know. And once you know it, things do become a little bit more repetitive. I mean, there's still different scenarios that come up, but I'd say that those first 2 years are so critical for your learning to get that base understanding of the industry and what it takes, and being able to just communicate real estate really well.
And so I think that's like, you could not have had a better segue, because the first one on my list is communication. Okay. It's communication. And it's because I think a lot of times we think of ourselves either as good communicators or not good communicators. And if we put ourselves in the camp of not a good communicator, we think that that's not a skill that can be learned. And communication is a learned skill. It's a learned skill. And too many times we just think, oh, well, I'm not going to be a good communicator, so I'm going to try and conduct all of my business online. When in fact, even conducting your business online, whether you're posting on social or sending out email drip campaigns, they still involve the ability to communicate human to human. And this is a skill that every real estate agent always needs and also needs to continue to improve, because as time goes on, the way I communicate with a client now is different than how I communicated with a client 5 years ago. And why is that? Because the consumer nowadays comes to me with a lot more knowledge than they had 10 years ago when I got into this industry. It was more of a black box when people got into the buying process, and now people have so many resources. So my ability to communicate with them has changed over time, and it will still need to continue to change and to grow. However, I feel a lot of the times we just feel like, hey, we're not a good communicator, so that's kind of the end of it.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that the communication part, because this is something that was really something for personally that I dealt with. I think there's just communicating in a way, in a matter, in saying the right things. But I think there's a confidence that is important to have, and that comes for me anyways, and I think for a lot of agents, for most people, it comes when you have the confidence that what you're saying is accurate and true and makes sense. And so, I know salespeople in general are known for kind of, saying things and that may not, I hope that's not true, but they sometimes are able to just kind of talk about things even though they don't fully know what they're talking about. But I'd argue that most people, you need that confidence in your own skills, in your own understanding. When you're communicating with a buyer or seller, or even just a friend talking about real estate, you need to be able to feel confident in your knowledge of the market conditions and know how to discuss that with people.
I'm laughing on the inside right now, and I think you know why. Because so many times you tell me that whether this could be real estate related, but oftentimes it's something else related, and you say that I say something and it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, when in fact I have zero understanding of the given topic.
Yes. So you're kind of a unicorn in that regard, which is you're able to you're very good at answering things on the spot, or like a client will throw you something that maybe you don't know how to answer, and you're very good at coming up with an answer on the spot that is not, you're able to not dance around, but you're able to say things that.
Yeah, but I like you're treating it as like this is a positive of something that I do. But where I was going with this is that that's not always the best communication strategy. Is just you're kind of painting this picture of it as being a positive, and maybe in some cases it is, but in more cases than not, I think it's okay if we pause and we think to ourselves, maybe I don't know the answer to this. Maybe I should not try and just BS my way through this, and I should go and talk to somebody, get the proper answer, and then I can present it with confidence. Because this concept of confidence, especially with regards to communication, stems from competence. So it's like competence is first, and then confidence comes second. Yeah. And so we just have to build that competence level. Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing to increase your knowledge and understanding, so that no matter what's being thrown at you or no matter what's being asked, you have an understanding. But I think it's that internal, you have to have a bit of that drive or that curiosity for understanding topics that may not be, it may not be something you need right this moment, but it's kind of taking an overview, or taking a step back and looking at the whole industry and saying, where can I improve my knowledge? And that will come back to you in being able to communicate better down the line when a situation comes up with a client.
Like if an agent was listening to this and saying, okay, I want to improve my communication skills, I have a couple of things that have really helped me, but there's one in particular, and I don't think I've ever spoken about it, but one thing in particular that when I do this on a regular basis, my communication 10x's within 1 or 2 days. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, it's writing. So right now I'm in this habit of writing for half an hour every single day. So that was part of my New Year's resolution, was to write every day for half an hour, and I've kept that up. I know we're only a few weeks in, but we're pushing to get into February with this. But what I noticed in doing that, even within a couple of days, my ability to communicate, I just noticed it. Cognitively, I was able to start. I just was able to basically bring things in more and assess them. And I think writing has this ability to help us think more clearly. And if agents spent time journaling, and if we were journaling about what could go wrong in an inspection, and let's say inspection goes south, what would I say to my client? For example, if you just kind of journal about that for 15 minutes, your ability to communicate dealing with an inspection issues will just multiply like crazy. And there are the other things like Toastmasters and improv classes, which I love, but I think the nature of writing just helps us start to clarify our thoughts, and then that's going to dramatically improve our ability to communicate. So you should be journaling about what's going on in the market. How would I handle this situation? Client rejects me. What do I do next? And we should be kind of journaling through our thoughts on that. And I think our communication will go to the next level very, very quickly. Like this is kind of a cheat code to get to the next level versus a long drawn out process.
I think that's a great tip. Yeah, I think writing and having some answers prepared, that's great.
On to the next one. What do you got?
Okay, so this one, and I know this one's kind of it's a big one. I think it's if I had to pick one that's probably the biggest, most encompassing reason for agents failing out of the industry, I would say that it has to do with a lack of entrepreneurial thinking. And what I mean by that is that I think it kind of ties into that concept of you're running your own business when you're starting real estate. It doesn't matter if you start your own brokerage or you work for a big name company. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you're starting your own business. And I think that's a different mindset than, oh, I'm starting a new job, because I think sometimes no one's necessarily going to tell you what to do, when to do it, what you should, but there's a lot less accountability in the industry. There's ways to get that. And I mean, you can team up with mentors and coaches and teams and you can build in some accountability. But I think at the end of the day, like, you are responsible for your success in this industry. And that's very similar. I mean, you actually alluded to it already at the beginning, saying how, a lot of startups fail as well. And it truly is building a business. And I think there are a lot of personality aspects that come into play. And I'd say it's not a matter of either you have them or you don't. I think these are things that you can cultivate and build upon. And there's lots of different ways to do that. But I mean, a few examples, and this is just actually, I was reading through, I think it was ATB, local bank recently, that sent out this email. It was about entrepreneurship. And I was reading through it. They had kind of a mind map, which had personalities of an entrepreneur. And I thought that was very interesting, because I feel like you could basically replace entrepreneur with real estate agent and everything would be applicable. And so I'll read you a few of the things on there. So on a few of the things that stand out. So ability to get things done. So I think that's huge, right? Being decisive, being driven, being determined, being courageous, confident, risk-taking, being tenacious, being resourceful, and the list goes on and on. I think all these adjectives that describe an entrepreneur are very, very applicable to a realtor as well. And I think there's not enough emphasis placed on that when people are thinking about getting into the career. It's not something that's talked about that much, but I would argue that if there's a little bit more emphasis placed on that mindset of an entrepreneur and developing those skills, I would think that would have a significant impact on the success rate of realtors.
Yeah. And like kind of where my mind's going is like, if you picture yourself as like one of the most successful entrepreneurs out there. So if we just like, if you picture yourself as like Elon Musk, like how would Elon Musk handle a situation like this? Yes, it's completely different levels, but it's still the same decision making that he has to make. He has to make a decision on, do I keep my Twitter employee? Do I let my Twitter employee go? Do I launch this feature? Do I not launch this feature? And where my mind goes sometimes when we're talking about entrepreneurial thinking is entrepreneurs, I find, are very good at two things in particular. They're very good at handling rejection and getting rejected, in the sense they treat that as information versus treating it as like a personal attack. Now, some entrepreneurs, yes, it can feel like a personal attack, and in real estate, rejection can feel personal at times. But entrepreneurs are just very good at, if an idea doesn't work, so if they're testing something, an idea doesn't work, they're not afraid to pivot and change. If you're door knocking and you knock on 100 doors and you are absolutely hating your life and you want to do something different, but you still have to build the business. And so what I love about that concept is entrepreneurs, it's kind of like it's kind of like a blank canvas sometimes when they're building their business, and where they envision what their business is going to be and what like the actual output of the artwork is when they're done on the canvas can be completely different. That to me is a very successful entrepreneur, where you just have like this vision, this is how I'm going to build my business, and you're not able to actually adapt and change. I think that's where people will tend to fail, and they'll be like, well, this is what happened to me because I told myself that I wasn't a salesperson. I didn't like sales. And so I didn't want to like push business on people. And then I didn't realize the fact that you can grow a whole business, which, I mean, I don't think we've never pushed somebody. And if we have, that was a mistake that we've learned from. And it's the fact that you can build your business in many different ways.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And it's constantly reevaluating and looking at ways. And I think that's really embodied in being a problem solver. Realtors are, in essence, problem solvers because there's not one specific element. I mean, there's a lot of different parts to the career that you have to be. You have to go out and get the business. So you have to get the clients, and then you have to have the technical understanding and the market knowledge in order to to find the properties or to sell their home and to price properties. And so you need that technical knowledge. But then there's a lot of other things you need. Like you need to be kind of a jack of all trades, really. You don't need to be 100% in any one of those areas, but you need to have a baseline level in a lot of different areas. And if there's things that you can't do, you need to hire it out. So a lot of agents, I mean, some agents are not good at doing paperwork or bookkeeping. So hire those tasks out, right? But you need to be a problem solver, and all those bases need to be covered. And you need to know when to pivot, when to proceed, and where to find information. And you kind of have to, it's a bit of a puzzle, I think, building your career as a real estate agent, because you find over time, you're like, okay, once you get business up and running, the first challenge is getting the clients. And then once you get the clients, then oftentimes the challenge becomes, okay, now I'm stretched thin and I'm really busy, and now I don't have the systems in place. So now I need to find the systems. And so there are different challenges that come up as you progress through the career. And I mean, one thing that can happen is if your problem is, okay, I don't have enough business, and then you need to figure out different ways to increase your conversations with people. So it's problem solving is what I think is really important, and making it taking ownership of that and saying, like, I need to figure out, like, I need to problem solve this. How am I going to do this?
I think that couldn't be overstated. I think the best real estate agents are ones that are very good at problem solving. And you named a couple of things like lead generation, but you've also said this to me, like when we've been working on a tricky deal and I'm like, oh, this one's going south, it's not going to end up working out. And then you tell me to pause and you say, can we solve this problem? And I even remember a deal we had last year. This was a tricky one. And you probably remember it. It had to do with like lots of permits and that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, this deal's going to collapse because there's just too many issues. The deal ended up actually coming together, but if at one point in time you said, all we have to do is just be good problem solvers here. There's a solution to this. And I just looked at it as buyer's going to walk away because they're unhappy with the level of permits and stuff in the home. And you said, there's a solution to this. We just have to find it. Yeah. I think if agents start thinking of themselves as problem solvers, not as agents, everything is just a problem to be solved. And every problem can be solved in one way, shape, or form. Yeah. It can be solved. I think that's just more of an empowering way of going about your business. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's very well said.
Let's move on to the next one. So the next one that I have on my list, speaking of problems, insufficient capital.
Interesting. I have that one on my list as well. So I'm interested to see what you have to say about it.
I think a lot of times we downplay it in the real estate space and we're like, oh, go all in, burn all your bridges and jump into real estate and it'll work out. And I think that's not looking at life in the best way possible. It's kind of like, go buy that home that's way over your pre-approval number, dump in all of your investments, cash out of all of your investments so you can buy this one house. But don't worry, you will work it out. And in real estate, it's kind of the same way. And oftentimes we're told, don't get a part-time job. Don't just go all in on this. I think of it in a different way, that first and foremost, we need to be able to put food on our table. But sometimes the food that we're putting on our table can be less expensive. So as real estate agents, if we are running into this problem of insufficient funds, we need to think of how the heck can we reduce our expenses like crazy? Because the majority, and this is the way that I've seen it, I'd love to hear your comments on this, but the best prospecting and the best marketing we've ever done has always been free. It's always been free. Like I can't, like sometimes there's like a little paid tool involved, but I can't think of a really good campaign that we ran that's been better than some of our like free campaigns that we've ran. And that to me, I think it's important for us to understand that you can make a lot of money in real estate without spending very much at all, but it's the lifestyle factors. It's the concept of, the avocado toast and things like that. Like, there are ways that we can reduce expenses, and we need to think that this is a short-term thing, but we need to reduce our expenses like absolutely crazy for our first 2 years of real estate. We should be trying to live off of the absolute minimal for your first 2 years of real estate. I have a couple of other points, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I do think every situation is unique. Every person's personal finance situation. I mean, there's a lot of people get into this career later in life, so they may have, they may have family to support, right? Like they may have kids at home, they have bills to pay, and so I think this is a very important topic, and I agree it's not really discussed in enough detail. Yeah, so I think the general rule of thumb that's mentioned often is you should have 6 months of savings or 6 months of living expenses saved up when you start in real estate, and I think that's great if you have that, but I'd argue that a lot of people don't have that. It's unlikely. So, I mean, I think people that have a spouse or a partner who they can rely on during a period, that's great, and they're very lucky. But I think a lot of people are not in that position where they have somebody to rely on to support them, and they need the funds. And this one I find very tricky, and it is a very personal. I think every situation can be different. There's different ways. I mean, you can say, okay, have a part-time job, but I think that's tricky. I do think that's tricky. I think this is something where you and I differentiate a little bit. I think you feel differently about this, but I do think it is hard it's not impossible, but I think for many people it is very hard to have a full-time job and try to start a real estate business, because I think there's only so many hours in a day and so much energy that a person has. Mm-hmm. I think you almost have to be a little bit superhuman in order to do both. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think you have to have a really strong mindset and a really high dedication to be able to build a business and work another job.
It's true, but I think there's also the other side to this is when you're under extreme financial pressure, oftentimes that's when we make the worst decisions in real estate, as in we push the client to buy a house because we need that commission check. Mm-hmm. And so if we can decrease our need to do a deal at any point in time in our career, whether we're brand new or whether we're we've been in the industry for a million years, if we don't need that deal, the chances of that deal converting are way higher. The second that we need that deal, our chances of conversion go down. And so that's not to say that we just need to be super nonchalant about our business, but you will notice that for example, your confidence, your ability to communicate will all go up when your need goes down. I guess my thinking on this is the dual income household, yes, definitely has an advantage, or somebody who has saved up a lot. There's also the concept of taking out loans, which I know people have done that, and they've done that very successfully too. And I'm totally sympathetic to the fact that there are other expenses in life that we can't just bring our expenses down to zero. But I think every single person, like us included, we could look at what we spend on Amazon once a month. I wouldn't want to, but we could, and we could be like, we don't need that thing. There's a lot of times where we make decisions where we just have to think scrappy for our first 2 years. Our first 2 years should be scrappy, both in our household and in our business. But that's not to say we're not feeding our kids. There still has to be priorities in life. And if that means that we have to find other means of income, the one suggestion I always have for agents is the other means of income is fine. That's putting food on your table, but your mind has to 100% be on real estate. Or that means of income can be something related to real estate, but your mind has to be, you're a real estate agent. This is just putting food on your table for the time being.
Yeah. And it should be a temporary situation where you work towards that focus of real estate. I've got a few more thoughts on this topic, which I think I'm surprised that not more people look at this. Well, maybe I'm not surprised, but it's kind of how I actually personally got started in the real estate industry is I was an assistant to somebody else. I think there's no better way than to learn and to gradually build up your knowledge and your comfort in the industry by working underneath somebody. And there's so many agents, successful agents, who are so busy that they don't have enough time in the day to get everything done. And just put yourself out there as hey, but be a licensed assistant so that you can start to do things, and so you can actually do licensed activities such as sit open houses, do showings, find comparables. Like you can do work that requires a license, but take that pressure off. And I'd say however long, a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long, so that you have that time where you're making an income, whether it's a lot of times assistants are paid a salary, and a salary could be lower, and maybe they have some sort of bonus structure where they're compensated depending on how much they contribute to deals. But it gives you that comfort to build your business the right way from the ground up. And this is how I built my business at the beginning. I was an assistant, and one thing led to another, but I was able to learn lots, get familiar with contracts and deals and how things are done, just that industry knowledge. And at the same time, I was able to do my own deals on the side, but I wasn't reliant on that because I wouldn't have been able to pay my bills. If I think I did 3 deals my first year, that's not enough to live off of. But it were stepping stones, and after a few years of doing that, I was able to go out on my own. And I think that's an avenue that not enough people pursue. And I think part of it is, I think it is a bit of an ego thing. I think people are like, oh, well, I don't want to be someone's assistant. Like, people may be older, right? They've been through that. They're like, I don't want to be below. I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. But don't look at it like a role like that. Like, look at it as an opportunity to learn from somebody. What are your thoughts on that?
That's such a good point. And my thoughts were around how can you actually, if you're doing something part-time, how can you do it in the real estate industry? And I would say that is probably the best possible outcome for somebody is be a licensed assistant and show homes on their behalf. Do licensed activities that they wouldn't be able to get, a virtual assistant to do. Yeah. And it can be like maybe you work for one agent for, 4 hours a week and another agent for 8 hours a week. Like you can do this and you're going to be learning so much. You're going to get if you're thinking, okay, well, I need social media content. You're going to be out showing homes. You're going to be doing real estate related activities. You can post all of that on social media. You're improving your skill set and you will become a better agent for it. So it's kind of like getting paid to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way to get a position like that is you have to come from a mindset of what can I offer these more experienced agents, right? Like, how can I help them? Come from that mindset of where do they need help? Just ask them and ask a bunch of agents and say, do you need help? Like, what can I do for you? And be open about what it is you're trying to do. I think you'd be very surprised at how many agents would be very open to that concept. And some may say, okay, I don't have, the budget or I don't have this or I only have this much, but piece it together. Like maybe there's multiple agents that you can do things for. And it's a win-win. I think it's a win for both sides.
I know agents that do this exclusively, like they're licensed assistants and this is what they do because they want more of a 9 to 5. And the income isn't quite as high, but it does add the flexibility. And the other beautiful thing about this is if you're doing this with a busy agent, there's a high probability that busy agent is going to be referring you deals, not only while you're working with them, but even after the fact, especially if you don't burn any bridges when you do part ways. Like you will still get deals from the busier agent. I think that's a really, really good call. Yeah,
that's actually an interesting segue. So one of the points that I was thinking about, and I didn't actually have this written down, but you and I have discussed this, and that's the mindset or the long-term mindset and thinking about like essentially what you don't always know where a deal is going to come from. Real estate is such a long-term game. So I think what I see agents doing is they focus on the here and now, and they focus on, okay, I want to get a deal done. And so they kind of have blinders on and they say, okay, is this going to lead to a deal? Yes or no? If it's no, then they move on to the next thing. But I would argue that as a new agent, a lot of times what they have is they may not have the money, but they do have the time. And use that time to kind of create opportunities for yourself and do that enough. Eventually, those opportunities that you've created will turn into deals, into success, into clients. And an example of that, actually, and you could probably think of more here. You've done this many, many times over the years. You're actually a perfect example of this. Is going that extra mile and doing things. So, for instance, one example I'm thinking of is years back. You sat an open house, or you sat multiple multiple open houses for, I think it was a condo, and you started just talking to people, a couple at the open house, and they just randomly wandered in. They weren't looking to buy anything at all, and I think they even told you that. They said, "Oh, we're just kind of here for, we just wandered in, just having a look." And so I think a lot of other agents would be like, okay, yeah, enjoy the house, see you later, kind of thing. But you just kind of chit-chatted with these guys. You just ended up having a conversation and got to know them a little bit, and just without any ulterior motive or without thinking of how can I turn this into a deal. And sure enough, I think it was a little while later, they ended up, I don't know if it was them or they referred their family to you, and that one conversation led to multiple deals over the span of the next 2 years. I think we did 4 deals that were traced back to that one open house conversation with an unqualified client, let's say. And I think it's and so that's an example. The other one is what we just talked about, is spending your time working for an agent. And it's these opportunities will come if you put in the effort. And I think that's something that a lot of agents don't think about at the beginning of their career.
It's so true. It's a matter of creating your own luck. Like, a lot of times you think, oh, well, maybe I just got lucky that these people wandered into this open house. But the fact is there wasn't many people at the open house. So we just kind of sat there and just shot the breeze about what was going on in our city for about 45 minutes. And yeah, that could have led nowhere. And I have had a lot of those conversations that actually do lead nowhere, but you don't know which one is going to lead somewhere. And it's kind of this concept, I think Naval talks about this, about increasing your surface area for luck, is how can you increase the surface area to actually make yourself luckier? And the first place my mind goes, well, one thing, there's a good book about this. I think her name's Dory Clark. It's called The Long Game. And it's actually a really good read for anybody who's kind of struggling with this concept of thinking as real estate. It's not about real estate. It's about generally building your network. But it's a really good read. But where I was going with this is that the thing about this is the majority of the time luck comes into play. I find it's when we're building acquaintances. Oftentimes in real estate, those people that are transacting with us, friends and family. But as we expand the number of acquaintances we have, our production tends to go up dramatically. And so when we're thinking about how can we put ourselves in these situations, it's can we go into situations where we can increase the number of acquaintances we have and start talking to people like humans. I don't even think, I'm thinking back to that conversation, I don't even think we spoke much about real estate, to be honest. And it just turned into kind of a fun personal conversation. They turned into acquaintance, and then deals came from it.
I think that the deals will follow, but it is something that I definitely see. It comes back to that entrepreneurial mindset and thinking long term is a lot of times, especially when agents are new and they need that deal, they become kind of hyper focused on that. I need to get that first commission check, or I need to get another deal done. But really, we got to take a step back and say, how can I create these opportunities, and that not just get the next deal, but also will for the next 5 years, right? That's the kind of time frame we should be thinking about in this industry. I think there's another example. This was years back. You met a couple. We had a listing. It was a tiny little studio apartment. It was very cheap. It was just this small listing, which some agents might have been like, oh, and it was a tough market at that time. The market was terrible. The condo market was really, 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 really rough. It was very hard to sell a place. So it's the type of listing that some agents would have turned down, actually. And we had the listing, and we had it for a while, and this couple was interested in it. You talked to them, built a relationship with them. They ended up not buying it, but we kept in touch with them, and over the years, and actually just I think about 2 years ago now, they bought a house. So their situation changed. Their income went up substantially. So they were able to qualify now for a much larger house. And a couple years afterwards, they ended up buying this house. So sometimes these things it's a long-term nurture process, and it's just be genuine with the people you meet, see how you can help them without worrying about getting a deal done right away.
It's interesting when you trace back those deals, and this same client reached out to you yesterday, I think, trying to get their daughter into a place. So they started in our market, it was 179 was what the condo was listed for, which is probably the lowest price property you could find in our market. Then they ended up buying around 758, and then now they're looking for another condo. So you just never know. You just absolutely never know. And they came from a sign call. They were just a sign call, and we just went and literally just had a good conversation with them.
Yeah, and so that's an opportunity, right? So coming back to if there's busy agents at your office and they have listings, like look for some of their listings that maybe aren't getting the attention they deserve because they're lower price point. Lower price point listings are such a key for getting buyers. And the reason for that is because a lot of times the higher price listings, the people that come there, they're often move up buyers and they already have an existing relationship with an agent. So it's hard to come into that because a lot of times they already have that connection. But the lower price properties, and we've seen this a lot over the years, in the lower price properties, that's where you get first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers often are unrepresented or they're just starting that journey and they don't have an agent yet.
First-time home buyer open houses are where the money's at. Like first-time home buyer properties, if there's any of those that are in your office, I would take those as often as possible. Mm-hmm. And even when you think about it, like a couple of our listings that we have right now that would be first-time home buyer related, we get a ton of sign calls on those. You don't get nearly as many sign calls on the higher price stuff for that exact reason, is those people are already represented.
Totally.
I know we're getting to time here, so why don't we both do one more?
Okay. Who's going? Me?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. This one, I'm sure you have this one on your list, but I think this is a great one to finish off on. And it's essentially lack of proper training. I think this is, in a nutshell, one of the biggest reasons why agents come out of the industry after a short amount of time is they're just not prepared for what is coming. And yes, there's different, I'm sure varies a little bit depending on where you are located, because real estate is hyper local and you're going to have your own training program. But I could speak for our system is yes, there's a lot that you learn in the course to get your license. You learn about contracts, you learn about kind of the legalities, and you learn a bit about the background of what you need to know. But one thing that's definitely missing is you don't actually learn how to run your business and how to set up your business for success in the long run, and you don't learn how to generate leads. There's no, at least in our program, there's not really a section that says this is how you generate business and this is how you follow up with clients and this is what you say to them and this is how you can build that. And so there's a big lack of training and education for an agent who's newly licensed. So yeah, I think that's huge. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think it's something, this is obviously a very big topic for you, seeing that that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to educate people, but it's so important because it's lacking severely.
Yeah, it really is. And it's too bad because when we get our license, we think of it as, okay, now we're licensed to go sell real estate, but we're not ready to sell real estate. Realistically, your license does not dictate your ability to sell real estate. It might give you the ability legally to sell real estate, but that's when the learning really begins, is when you actually have the license. Like that's when the training actually begins. And there's so much that we need to understand. And I think back to my own career, and there's like oftentimes within careers, there's certain points in time, like there's certain inflection points where things are kind of going along and then something changes and then you see like this wild inflection point. And I think back to one of the first training programs that I took, and it was like completely transformative for me, to the point of like when I came out of that training program, I was like, okay, I'm going to implement all of these things. And within 6 months' time was an inflection point. And so oftentimes like what we get out, like the outputs, the actual amount of business that we're able to garner is going to be dictated by the inputs that we put into ourselves. So how we improve ourselves is going to govern the number of outputs. So many times we're focused on getting the next deal, getting the next client, meeting the next person, the next social post. But if we are actually a better agent, all of that gets easier. Mm-hmm. Then it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at getting from point A to point B, I could walk there. I could definitely walk there, or I could just get in my vehicle and drive. So yeah, they're both going to take time, but one is going to be way easier. And that's because I have the vehicle to get me from A to B. And I think oftentimes we're concerned because there's a lot of information out there. And I think a lot of times from a new agent perspective, you don't know where to start. And there's not really any right or wrong. There's finding a system that works for you and then following it like crazy, and follow it like blindly for 6 months' time. Your life and your real estate business will be completely different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I got a few more, but the one that I think I'd like to touch on is the concept of our behaviors as real estate agents, and then also we're quitting too soon. So the behaviors as real estate agents, the only thing I want to bring up about that, because we've already discussed this is more like entrepreneurial mindset, but we need to be doing the things that are required in order to be successful. And oftentimes where my mind goes with this is we set out a plan for ourselves, but so many of us don't actually accomplish it. And then we get down on ourselves and we think that we're failures, when in fact, the list that we just put in front of ourselves, like if I look at your to-do list right now, it is super, super long. If you at the end of the day always felt bad about the fact you didn't get everything done, well, your list is extremely long. So I think we have to be very cognizant of our behaviors, but then where that goes is we end up feeling like these failures. And then we get out of the industry. And if we just stuck with it for a longer period of time, we would see the success. And there's a whole concept of like slowly, then suddenly. So our business is going to grow very, very slowly initially. If you're not one that has your business grow slowly initially, it's probably because you're coming in with some leg up on others, but your business is going to grow very, very slowly off the start. And then speaking of these inflection points, you're going to hit a point. But too many times we get out too early. We just give up too early. We're not getting things done, so we just get up too early. And if we just stuck with it for longer, and not just sticking with it, like if something's not working, we have to change. If our prospecting methods aren't working, we have to change. If our communication isn't working, we have to improve it. But if we continue to think of it as everything is a problem to be solved, we will get there. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And one thing you just brought up that I think is a challenge is it's knowing when to push through and continue on the path. And, whether it's, knock on more houses, go do more open houses, like when do you, and this is not an easy thing to answer, but it's knowing the difference between when do you need to pivot and go a different direction and go the other way, or when do you need to just stick with it and keep going a little bit more. I think this is something, just from my personal experience watching some agents, I think it's a struggle that people have, right? And I think the agent themselves, they don't know. They don't know. You don't know, like, should I just keep doing this and this will work out? Or at what point do you pivot? And that's where I think that having that guidance, that mentorship, that person that you look up to who's been in the industry, that's where they can help you and say, okay, let's see what you've been doing and should you change something, or should you double down on what you're doing? Because it's a bit of a dominoes effect. Like what's coming to mind is, there's a book that I read. It was, and maybe some people will know Jason Priestley from Beverly Hills 90210, the TV show. His mom is actually a real estate agent. She's a realtor in, I think in Victoria, BC, or somewhere in BC, and she wrote a memoir this year. She's a little bit older, and she's kind of looking back at the end of her career, and she wrote this beautiful memoir about her career in real estate. And I found that to be very interesting. And one of the things she talks about her own journey, and one of the stories she tells is how she went and started her business. This is back, I want to say it's probably in the 80s, 90s, I think it's 80s, like quite a while ago. And she said she started door knocking. She started just going door to door to door, and she hit a moment where nothing was sticking. She was just going out, door knocking, trying to see if people were interested, wanted to buy or sell. And she was doing this for a long time, and she hit a wall where she was like, what am I doing? And she had that same moment that a lot of agents have of like, why did I get into this career? What am I doing with myself? And she did continue on, and then she knocked on somebody's door, and finally someone said, hey, you know what? Why don't you come in, have a coffee? Let's talk. Anyways, that ended up like leading to a deal, which then that deal led to more deals, and it just kind of was a snowball effect from that moment on. But there's just essentially was this long period where there was effort, nothing sticks, ready to give up, ready to quit, ready to stop. And then that next one was success, and that led to multiple other deals. And it was just this very inspiring thing. And I think that's something that's really tough, because how do you know as a new agent, when do you know that next door is going to be the successful one? And so that's I think that's something that a lot of agents I think can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's kind of a difference between something not working because you absolutely hate it. Like, for example, if you had to go out and door knock, you'd probably be out of real estate too, because like that wouldn't be something that you would do. It's just not fitting for how you would grow your business. And so I think we have to think about how we grow our business, but then also we have to give things like a true test. And I think at a minimum, we have to do things for 6 months in real estate, just because the sales cycle is longer. You can't test something for a week. I mean, if you door knock for a week and you think that it is the worst thing that's ever happened, you can quit it. But if you door knock for a week and you just haven't got the success, well, door knock for 6 months and then let's see what's happened. And I think a good test requires at least 6 months, period of time. Well, this was fun.
This was fun.
This was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would just say for listeners, let us know what you think of this format. If you have any feedback for us, if you'd like to hear and see more of these, we would happily do so. And then you wouldn't be forced just to listen to me go on and on. Although we'll still, of course, have those. We're not going to get away from those. But if this was valuable, please do let us know. You can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com, or I'm on Instagram at the.michael.montgomery. And then Willemina, your Instagram.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think my Instagram handle is at Willemina_Montgomery.
I think you're right. But we'll link it up in the show notes and the description in case anybody wants to shoot Willemina a quick note. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in the next lesson.
Thanks, everyone.